Here to discuss what's going on is Kyle Seraphin. He's a former FBI agent, host of the excellent Kyle Seraphin Podcast as well. Kyle, good to have you back with us, sir.
Vince, always good to be on WMAL.
It's amazing what's going on here in this city, in Washington, D.C. They keep kicking the can on this thing. They reauthorize it, and every time they do, they say, oh, we'll get to fixing it at some point. Seems like now's the time to do it, isn't it, Kyle?
That'd be nice. So it's interesting. Even the process is convoluted, right? We had a no vote where some people were celebrating that they voted no, and some other people were saying, well, we voted yes because we wanted to get an amendment in there to require a warrant. We're going to have 702 anyway. So even the process is convoluted. It feels like on purpose to try to keep it out of the hands of the American people. And most people don't have the attention span to grasp it. Most people don't even understand what's happening. And what's happening is that the FBI has an ability that goes all the way back to 2001, and it's sort of grown incrementally to the point where there's this cooperation. There's a database that the NSA maintains through these mass digital surveillance capabilities, and the FBI has searchable access to it. And they're expressly forbidden from using it the way that they often do. And they've done a lot better on it. And, Chris Wray's gone in front of Congress and letting them know, hey, we're doing a great job. We've got a very high level of compliance. We only violated the American people's civil liberties like 278,000 times. So that's only in a year. So we're way better from the millions we were doing previously. I mean, I just think of it as a dad these days. If your kid abuses a toy and hurts somebody else with it, it's like, well, you probably could get that toy anymore. That's not going to be good for you. And the FBI uses this thing not for foreign intelligence. They're using it for all kinds of crazy stuff. They're going after transnational organized crime, and they're telling us it helps stop fentanyl. That's not what it's for. It's just not designed for that.
So we have a separate agency who is dedicated to foreign intelligence. That's the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is for domestic issues. So why does the FBI even have access to a foreign intelligence surveillance system?
Sure. So here's the deal. The system is called DWS, the Data Warehouse System. It is a overlay that allows the FBI to query the database that the NSA grabs. What is the NSA grabbing? They're grabbing anything that touches American telco or wires. Any of the companies that the American government has authority over, the NSA will flex on that. And so let's say there is a fill-in-the-blank country that is doing emails on a Google, on a Yahoo, on a Hotmail, on take your pick. When they do that, especially if they reach out and talk to an American, we're going to see the emails going between a foreigner and whoever is of interest to us, oftentimes an American. Now, if you have a foreign intel subject or you have a terror subject that is communicating with an American, that's really interesting to us as FBI agents. That's kind of what we're supposed to be doing, right? We think we're supposed to be going after them. But if you turn around and grab that person's name and you say, well, they're talking to this dangerous person, and you plug that into the database, that's exactly illegal. It's called reverse targeting. So you can't actually do that, but that's the most functional way that the database is set up. And of course, you're talking about people, even who are working non-criminal threats in the intelligence sphere. They're all 1811 criminal investigators. That's how they're trained. So FBI agents, half the agency doesn't even look for crimes. They're looking for quote unquote threats, whether they be counterintelligence or whether they be counterterrorism. They don't even have to rise to the level of being a federal crime to be able to have a full investigation on them. And there's some real dangerous stuff that occurs because of that sort of that funding and that push by the agency to go towards national security, is at least 50% of the agency. And then the other part is the thing that everyone thinks the FBI does, which is criminal investigations. And that's actually considered kind of like the simple little brother. It's not nearly as complex or fun, and less people are promoted doing it. It's the real kind of fun work that the FBI wants to do, and who gets promoted up in the chain are the national security types. They're basically violating civil liberties on the regular.
And the criminal investigation side is a smaller part of the FBI's mission now than it used to be, correct?
Right. So we got maybe four major groups. You've got the cyber, which does both criminal and national security. You've got the counterintelligence, that's most exclusively intelligence-based stuff, national security, with a little tiny bit of criminal called espionage and maybe some counterproliferation. Then you've got the terrorism side of things, domestic and international, and a lot of that stuff never rises to the level of an actual federal crime. And then you've got the criminal division. So when you're talking about it, it's a very small fraction comparatively. The staffing is lower, the budget is lower, and kind of the priority set is lower. Here's what should scare everybody, because everybody thinks the FBI does criminal investigations, and they're very easy to understand. They're basically linear. Something happens, you try and find out who does it, you gather evidence, you take it to court, and then there's an outcome, right? That's the end of it. Maybe some appeals at the end. But when we're talking about intelligence investigations and national security, and this includes both counterintelligence and counterterrorism, There's circles that spin off more and more circles, because as you touch more people, you can find out more about the quote unquote threat. The more you find out about the threat, the more cases you can open. And I'll just tell you this, and I've reported this to Congress going back to 2021. It was one of my original disclosures to them. I think it's a really big deal. The FBI can easily open a full counterintelligence investigation on any major American figure, going all the way down to like a local mayor or a city council person, anybody that is of note. That includes people in the media, people in academia, that includes people that are in a church, that includes politicians. They can open it under the guise of that person being a potential victim. And by opening it up as a victim, they have all of the rights that that person was actually engaged in the threat actively, because they need to know what your vulnerabilities are, and they research you all the way to the hilt. So being that as it is, they can open it on anybody, including you and me, and probably definitely me.
But wait a second. But in doing so, if the FBI was looking into whether or not I was a victim of something, wouldn't they alert me to the fact that they're interested in investigating that very question, or is this all kept secret from me?
It's kept secret because this is on the national security side, so everything is going to be done under the veil of it is secret, no foreign dissemination. We cannot share this with anybody. We're going to make sure that you're safe, Vince, by looking into you and making sure that nothing bad has happened to you. And by the way, if you happen to be doing something bad, we'll probably find that out as well. So that's a little bit of an added bonus to us. And if we find something that's a totally unrelated crime, let's say we find out that, I don't know, you're laundering money or you're involved in wire fraud, then we can actually just build that alongside of it. We do that. It's called parallel construction. So you build a criminal case. And since I know the things that I'm going to be searching for are already there, I saw it on the national security side that I won't admit to, we'll just go to a grand jury and we'll subpoena it and we'll get it. And then we won't be looking foolish because we already know it's there because we already saw. So when you're talking about how dangerous this thing, nobody can underestimate it. And all of this is housed in a single paragraph that is classified. Most of the FBI's sort of guidebook, it's called the Dialogue, is available for anyone to look at. There's a classified little paragraph, and it's literally only a few lines, and any of the members of Congress with a security clearance should be able to go find it. It's Appendix G, like golf. And that little paragraph of justification allows exactly what I'm talking about. I brought this to their attention, and whenever my friends are sitting in an actual room with an actual Congress member, none of them have ever heard this before, and they all kind of get pale-faced when they learn about it. Why this is not common knowledge is beyond me, because we've been saying it from the rooftops, and it needs to be fixed.
Appendix G is where all the tyranny lies.
Well, that's certainly a big piece of it. I mean, there's other tools, obviously, but being able to open up a case on anybody is a good step to it. And 702, most people think of FISA as being this long-drawn process, and the full FISA process is there's a Woods file, which means you've got to have all the facts documented. They're very tedious. They take weeks to put together. They're argued in front of a secret court called the FISC, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. So in theory, that thing should work. Now, if the FBI lies like they did against Donald Trump, that's not good, and that actually works out really hard. But 702 FISA is way, way lighter burden. It's actually approved in the field office, as far as I recall, and you can write it up in a morning, and you can have it approved by the end of the day or the next day, because we're not collecting on Americans, in theory, who have a right to any sort of privacies. We go after foreign intelligence sources, but then we can also hop on the people that they are, in fact, communicating with. So while we can't reverse target them, we can just create a new 702, 2 jumps away from the original target to be able to continue to expand, like I said, circles. Imagine throwing a rock in a pond and watching those ripples go out further and further. You're throwing more and more rocks in the pond. You're going to get a lot more ripples. And as they overlap, you're going to have more and more dots connected. And, they don't ever have to go to a crime. That's the craziest part. Most people think they're working towards crime. I asked once, what are we even doing this for? And the answer was, so we can know more things. And I said, and then do what? And they said, well, then we'll know more stuff. I said, no, that's what we'll know, but that doesn't mean what we're going to do with it. And the answer is just, we'll figure it out later. We're just going to gather information. That's what intelligence agencies do. 50% of the FBI is doing that right now. They are operating that way. The problem is they have badges and guns, and they can lock you up. And when you have an intelligence agency with guns, you have a secret police. That's been the case for the last couple hundred years as we looked across the world.
Kyle Seraphin, what are the guardrails here? What kind of protections are American citizens afforded, if at all? Are there consequences for trampling on their civil liberties in this way?
Well, you're never going to find out about it unless something happens and you end up getting picked up for some other reason. So probably you won't find out. The guardrails are minimal. And even as we learned in the Durham report, the only way that you could fix a lot of the stuff that goes wrong, particularly in the intelligence sphere, is have better morally acting FBI employees. That was his statement. He's like, there's no policy, there's no guidebook change that would make this work. We have to have people that are committed to the Bill of Rights and understand that that's their job first. And then, their agency loyalty should come after the Constitution, kind of like the oath of office we all swear. So it's there, It's a cultural problem. If your culture doesn't really care, and we just had Chris Ray go out and say this, on the Hill, he says, well, we've got to have 702 because otherwise it would be really difficult for us. Great. It's supposed to be hard to do the job of keeping people safe. You're trying to do pre-crime. So you should have a very high burden when you want to go in and invade people's civil liberties. And there's a reason why the Constitution says go get a warrant. It should be noted that almost all counterintelligence cases and all long-term terrorism cases are very slow-moving. They're intentionally slow-moving, they are very deliberate, and they are not something that happens today and tomorrow something explodes. In fact, the stuff that does that, it usually goes off without the FBI knowing about it. So when we're talking about these cases, the joke used to be if they brought us something really hot on a Friday morning, we would say, well, we're going to get to this right away. I mean, not today, obviously. We'll do it on Monday after we have coffee and everything. Sometime after 10 o'clock on Monday, we'll get to this because CI moves very slowly, counterintelligence. And so the kind of tools talking about, there already are caveats and carve-outs for exigency when we talk about FISA. There should be no problem going and getting a warrant. Is it a real pain in the butt? Of course. But it's actually supposed to be a pain in the butt to invade American civil liberties. Why the FBI is arguing on this, I mean, it's weird to watch it. And watching people, Bill Barr come out in favor of it and Mike Pompeo, this permanent Washington establishment class that really just wants to keep power in the state's hands, there's nothing conservative about that. It's the opposite of conservatism.
No, not at all. And are you as annoyed about this as I am when it comes to the fact that, like, what you're describing sounds unconstitutional already? The idea that we need a law to say, hey, it's actually illegal. Well, it's already unconstitutional. It almost seems absurd that we're at the point where we're saying you need to get a warrant when the Constitution said that in the first place.
I agree with you 100%. This was my initial problem with being assigned to this sort of work. I didn't understand what they were going to ask me to do. I told, hey, we're going to go after and we're going to get spies. We're going to collect scalps. And it's like, great, that sounds good. We should protect the American people from spies and espionage and people selling our technology. I got no problem with that. But if our job is just to research Americans who are being American and they might have a friend who lives in China or Iran or Russia, I've got a major problem with that, especially if they're doing legitimate business and we're going to spy on them in case they accidentally do something wrong or in case we need to use them for some reason. Yes, I think that's unconstitutional. I brought that to my supervisor's attention right away, which technically actually constitute whistleblowing activity, which I didn't know about when I first started working there. But going back to 2017, it always looked wrong. I hated the work, and I asked them to move me, and to the point where one of my supervisors sat me down, I think in 2018, and she said, where do you see yourself in this organization in 5 years? And I said, if I'm still on the squad in 6 months, I'm going to be resigning. It doesn't really matter about 5 years from now. I need to get out of here. I can't do this anymore. And moreover, I don't know how you guys do it. And sure enough, they actually found me another job in the bureau. That only lasted until I found some more stuff. So, it's just the people who have the problem with it have been weeded out, and the people who are going to do it. Here's another crazy thing, Vince, that should blow your mind. I'm a pretty smart guy. I don't need to go any further than that and say it. I tried to do everything by the book in DWS to do what they call minimization, because you're getting raw intelligence. Right. I mean, it's like opening up Vince Coglianese's email box. I can look at your Gmail and see what you got, and I can click through it and find out this was in the spam and this was tagged and all this. You can see all of that. And being able to do something like that, you're supposed to minimize it. There's all these procedures to kind of help protect your identity and so on. And I tried to do all those procedures correctly. I sat down for an audit one time with my work, and every single thing that I thought I was doing correctly was wrong. And the training agents around me did it all wrong. And as far as I know, probably the entire squad failed that audit, which is why all these 278,000 violations exist, because it's actually really hard to do it in that system because it's government software. It's poorly designed. And the things that say what you think they're going to do don't actually do that. So in 18 months of a guy with a very much above average IQ, I was not able to do it. And I spent 10 hours a day messing with stuff, just going, what on earth is happening? So the training is bad, the tools are dangerous, and then the mission set doesn't make sense. So.
In other words, it's almost guaranteed that an FBI agent who's involved in this type of surveillance will commit an abuse, wittingly or otherwise.
I would say that 702 FISA is kind of like having a metal detector that you send everybody through. I use this analogy because it's easy. Imagine you're a TSA officer. Your job is to make sure no guns on the airplane. Everybody goes through the metal detector. If you find guns with the metal detector, you can't use the metal detector as justification to find the gun. But you can't let a gun on the airplane. So you're going to use it that way. That's the only way it's meant to be used. It doesn't make any sense.
Kyle Seraphin, lastly, on this issue of, I asked you about guardrails, and you mentioned that it's kind of really up to whether or not people are going to abide by their oath. It's the culture. How would you assess the state of the culture now? Is there a sense that people should be protective of the rights of American citizens, or is it more dangerously tyrannical than that?
The FBI has always been kind of a fraternity, I think, and the biggest sin that you can always do is speaking out against the FBI, like embarrassing the Bureau has always been much of a bigger deal than anything else. So that's the thing that they hold above all else. And, guys like me and Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle have obviously done that. So you're PNG'd, we're kicked out of the club, which is fine. I don't think that people even necessarily know it because most people don't realize that their oath is to the Constitution. They think that the agency represents the same thing. And you don't really have that choice, it turns out. People need to be much more critical of what they're being asked to do. I don't think that is the culture of the FBI based on me being there for 6 years and change and 5 years in Washington, D.C. I didn't see people looking around saying, is this really what we're supposed to be doing with our time? Are we being good stewards of the taxpayers' money? That's just not how people in government in general look at things. So the FBI is no different in that sense.
All right, Kyle Seraphin, as always, really appreciate your time on an important subject. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you, and people should check out your podcast, the Kyle Seraphin Podcast, sir. Thank you very much.